I think it's fair to say that the Bitcoin ETF really did centralize things to a lot of extent, meaning
why the mental barrier of 100K?
I don't know. I think just for me, it's having conversations with not just like one or two investors. This is like multiple angels, other founders. This is like coming from everybody. It's not just me. But to me, it does seem the 100K barrier is like where everybody's waiting for. It's kind of weird because we're going through like a recession / depression in the world. So this will probably be the first time in history that we go through that in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I'm not too sure on that. I think we'll know here in October. If price doesn't run up, we'll know like, oh, this is not like every other cycle. Trust me when I say this, like they're going to come after your Bitcoin content. They don't want you to have a cold storage. They don't want you to have a UTXO. They don't want you to have on and off ramps. They don't want you to have freedom of speech. They don't want you to have a lot of things, man. If they can put you in a pod and take Ubers all day back and forth and eat Uber Eats and all these other things, like they're perfectly happy letting you live that life and putting VR headset on and all that stuff. Like that's the life that they want you to live. But I'm telling you, when I say this, like
Bing bong, I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast, where I've got the man, the myth, the legend, recurring guest, Car, in the house here, back again. But Car, a lot has gone on since the last time we spoke. We recently had the Telegram CEO now under arrest. We don't know why. There's nothing being released. Simply Bitcoin got taken off of YouTube. The UK is coming after memers. Car, are they attacking our freedom of speech now, or what, man? Like, what's going on with all this stuff?
You know, this is something that I've been sounding the alarm on for about a year and a half. So probably about a year and a half, I've been talking about this and how they were going to come after Bitcoiners, and everybody thought I was crazy. Everybody thought I was like, oh, you know, Car's just saying his stupid shit that he always says. And no, I mean, we're past the point of them fighting with us. This is where now it's kind of like you had to choose a side 6 months ago, 12 months ago. This is just kind of where it was always going to play out. And I think a lot of people didn't actually think it was actually going to happen. I think one of the things that's really surprising to me when I look at all this stuff, I'm wondering now how many other companies out there that are now working with governments and centralized data grabbers and these types. I wonder how many more companies are out there. I think I've written an article and I can't pull it up right now, but there's a humongous industry that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to big data and how the government buys it from a lot of these companies. And I don't think people actually realize like who's purchasing a lot of this upstream data that's getting collected. And I think what we're seeing here is who might be the companies and the people that are saying no to this, maybe possibly. There's no evidence of that, but kind of my pleb spidey sense just kind of tells me that, hey, there's people that are playing ball and there's people that are not playing ball. And it's not surprising the people that are not playing ball are getting kind of picked up. The other thing I will mention this, and this is me just kind of you know, chirping at the Telegram guy, but he's a shitcoiner, right? I mean, he released the TON token in 2018. He was trying to circumvent it and trying to do a lot of things. SEC clapped back on him back then. Then he launched a nonprofit and was able to funnel it that way. So the other aspect to this is, you know, Telegram has 500 to 300 million users worldwide. So there's no surprise there that they're coming after them. When you have a cryptocurrency on top of a very big private chat of a sort that you can play micro games, and now, you know, maybe purchasing other things through it, and then you're coordinating some other things attached to that. And then on top of that, you're just a guy who always pisses the wrong people off. And then you happen to be also in this jurisdiction that wants to capture you anyway. I mean, you kind of have to be smart about it. I mean, the best way to kind of look at it, and the way I kind of look at this, is like, you got to pick the hill that you want to die on, right? Like, because we're all going to die on a hill. Like, do you want to die on like a cryptocurrency ton, you know, freedom of speech kind of hill, or would you rather just die on a Bitcoin hill? And to me, it's like completely obvious that if there's a hill worth dying on, it's a Bitcoin hill, not so much a you know, some of these other things that he had going on. But that's kind of my quick thoughts on it. I haven't really been paying that much attention to it. I saw the news on Stacker News over the weekend, and then kind of already, kind of appeared to me, it just seemed like there was all these things that he was doing wrong in the eyes. This is not in my eyes, in the eyes of the people that are in control. So those are my quick hits on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all interesting too because we've had a lot of politicians come out and support or at least try to get involved with Bitcoin too. But on the flip side of things, the freedom of speech is kind of like along the Bitcoin ethos. And we actually even had Mark Zuckerberg come out today. I don't know if you saw this, Car, but he said that the Harris Biden Harris whatever party was coming at him basically to censor people with Meta and everything, Facebook, Instagram, and all that during 2020. And he came out and wrote a full statement about it too. So it's interesting that all these things are kind of coming out now, especially like during this election time. And, on the flip side of it too, they're all kind of getting into this Bitcoin. I don't know if I could call it like a full Bitcoin ethos, because I mean, Trump is releasing trading cards now on Bitcoin too, but through ordinals and whatever. So whatever your viewpoint is on that, it seems like there's a kind of an uprising where people are getting annoyed with the status quo and kind of, I guess, like taking the full shift, right? I mean, we had that cancel culture. Everybody was so walking on eggshells. And now it seems like on the flip side of it, everybody wants more private things. Everybody is kind of taking that shift. Are you noticing that on like your day to day? I know you're immersed in the Bitcoin world, but is that kind of like your general sense as well?
As far as shifting from where, Brennan?
But essentially, like, where everybody was more of like following the status quo, kind of following in line. And now everybody's kind of trying to break the norms of the past, I don't know, 4 to 6 years or so, where everybody was kind of afraid of everything. And now it seems like everybody was as kind of annoyed with that in a sense, right? I mean, obviously we had the COVID pandemic and everything else. So after all that, I think everything's kind of shifting the exact opposite way, but I'm curious to hear how you're feeling about it.
I think if you come to the front lines where I'm at, like I see it a little bit differently than others, and people on the front lines might disagree with me, but at least from my vantage point and what I can see, it doesn't mean I know anything, but this is just how I perceive it. To me, there's definitely a shift going on in the space. A lot of people are trying to move us over to these eCash stuff, move us over to the Nostr stuff, move us over to a lot of centralized planning type of initiatives. And doesn't mean that it's right or wrong or bad for Bitcoin. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you're seeing a lot of the influencer space push us in that direction, which I think is fine and good. And that's where the investments lie for them. And I think that's perfectly fine. But there is a growing majority of us here on the front line that are still walking the Bitcoin Lightning path and are comfortable, well, maybe not comfortable, but are willing to do the hard way, the long, hard path. And I do see those divergence already happening. I think that's been happening for almost about 6 to 7 months now. I think the non-custodial route is the harder route, and I think the mints and the eCash and all that stuff is the much easier path. And I think that's where the bulk of the industry wants us to move in that direction. But there's a good group of us that, and it's not just here in Austin, it's not just here at Pleblab, it's all over the place. We have both sides of that inside of Pleblab. Like there's some people that work on the eCash stuff, there's some people that work on stablecoin stuff, there's some people who work on the Bitcoin and Lightning only stuff. So we're all over the place on that gamut. But I would say from my vantage point, you are seeing those two divergent paths take place. I don't know if that helps answer your question at all.
No, it does 100%. And I think it's interesting, like, I guess from your perspective, with all the development that you're in, right? Do you see it as like a positive or negative now that, I mean, like Trump was at the Bitcoin conference? Do you feel like that was more of a show, maybe a facade? I mean, I take what you want about his speech. I personally didn't really hold much weight into it because I didn't really feel like, he was going to come in there and be like super, punctual about Bitcoin and everything like that. I think for me, the way I viewed it was he's getting there and he's open to speaking at the Bitcoin conference. One, because there's a lot of people there, but two, because he sees kind of the future in the tech and people moving forward in that. So that means jobs and innovation and everything else that kind of like America has always stood for. So how do you view it? And what kind of weight did you take in Trump showing up to the Bitcoin conference?
Yeah, I'm very much apolitical, man. I don't follow any of the stuff. I'm probably the person to probably not ask this question to, because I really don't care about politics in America and all that kind of stuff. I don't fall left or right or middle, up, down, south, side. I don't follow any of that stuff, to be honest. It's just never been a thing that interests me. To me, when I saw it, it was just strictly electioneering, which is just a form of being able to engineer your desirable outcome through elections. And that's how I saw it initially. I think hats off goes to the BTC magazine crew for even getting them down there. I think I did not see that coming. So that was cool. But to me, at the end of the day, like Bitcoin doesn't require leaders from these nations to succeed or win. This is why the non-custodial hard Bitcoin Lightning path is the way to do it, is because this doesn't require, you voting Democrat or Republican or independent, in a ballot box in November. If you go the hard path and not the centrally coordinated, centrally planned path, then you'll have that option. But the biggest fear that I see happening right now, at least in our landscape, is just the amount of doomerism that's happening in the space. I think it's just becoming to the point where it's just like, it's very similar to porn. You're looking for the next high, the next thing that's going to get you the more salacious thing. And it's just, to me, when I see that in the Bitcoin space, that's the only thing that kind of scares me a little bit, because it puts us in this mindset of like, you're not able to climb out of, there's no hope there, if that makes any sense. And I've only seen that grow over the course of the past 4 years since I've been building on it. But those are my kind of thoughts on it. I don't pay attention too much to it. I do think at the end of the day, like the price is going to do whatever it's going to do, regardless of some of these desirable outcomes that other people in the space want to happen.
Yeah, so you brought up two things I want to dive into: doomerism and the price. So the doomerism aspect, I think, is interesting because like you've been building, right, Pleblab for quite some time now, and you've kind of been, the narrative has been building it in a bear market. Well, everybody says once the halving hits, we're back into a bull market. But as somebody that's kind of in the weeds with VCs, startups, all that kind of stuff, like, do you feel we're in the bull market quite yet? Or do you think we're still just building in the bear, just kind of on a broader scale right now? Are you looking for the best way to store your seed phrase? Well, I've got it for you. It's Stampseed. They've got the #1 punch plates where you can order a full-on package where they've got every single thing. They've got all the letters. You could just get it in there. And they've got this sick hammer, which they've engineered to make it so easy for you to punch in that titanium steel plate and store your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. So go ahead and get your Bitcoin off of these exchanges and use promo code Green Candle for 15% off. They're helping power the show. They've got the Bitcoin logo. You can punch it into your seed phrase as well, if you could see it here. They've got a lot of cool stuff. And now I'm helping empower you to get your Bitcoin off an exchange utilizing Stampseed and storing your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. Now get to it. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like it's kind of weird because we're going through like a recession / depression in the world. So this will probably be the first time in history that we go through that in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I'm not too sure on that. I think we'll know here in October. If price doesn't run up, we'll know like, oh, this is not like every other cycle. I was talking to an OG like 2 weeks ago, and I asked him the same thing, and he's like, I don't look at price. I don't care about price. That sort of answer. So you kind of get that answer when you ask these people that might know where everything's headed, But at the end of the day, I think it's I think we're still sitting pretty at 60K Bitcoin. I mean, I think everybody's obviously waiting for 100K. I think that's where everybody's waiting before they start doing anything with it. But yeah, that's kind of where I see the price going. But to be honest, like I try not to pay too much attention to it because it can be distracting after a while.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I don't really necessarily like look at price too much, but I see it as like kind of the biggest indicator for a lot of things, right? Whether that's venture capitalists kind of peaking a little bit more interest, whether that's, just a general normal population kind of coming in. Like I think price, as much as we don't like to talk about it for the Bitcoin OGs, it's a bigger driver for a lot of like outside factors outside of Bitcoin. So like on that note, like, are you seeing like how are venture capitalists kind of reacting to a lot of stuff? Because obviously you guys got a bunch of successful startups under the hood of Pleblab right now. So yeah, feel free to shout any of them out, but I know that there's a lot of great stuff going on there. I know you guys got Yopaki, you got a lot of great stuff. You know, startup days coming soon. So how's the response been as far as like early stage Bitcoin companies or like maybe that mid-level startup in the Bitcoin space when it comes to like VCs coming in, trying to get into the space, seeing it's a growing space, but the price is kind of, I guess, flat for less, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, kind of what I see from my, vantage point again. To me, it's a couple things. So it is the price, kind of what I've heard, at least, back channel kind of stuff is that a lot of people are waiting for 100K before they, yellow into some of these funds that are tied to Bitcoin venture capital. This is what I've heard. The second thing I've heard also is it's very, not only heard, but seen, it's very hard to raise right now if you're doing a Bitcoin Lightning company, just in general. Your chances are probably better if you're doing something eCashy or Nostr. And that's not me like saying anything kind of shade or whatever. It's just the truth. I think it's never to be, and with all that being said, it's never been easier though to get a grant doing these smaller projects though. I will say that. Just in general, like, so there's open stats you can apply. If you have a Nostr project, you'll likely get funding for it. Same thing with HRF. If you're doing like a Bitcoin Lightning initiative, that meets their requirements, you probably get a grant for it. So I will say compared to, then there's Wolf, the accelerator. So you can go that route and they'll give you 250K if you meet their requirements for that stuff. I will say compared to when I came in 2021 and 2020, it's never been easier for a Bitcoin person to come in the space and like make it, right? Whatever that means to them, whatever success means to them. But when I came in, you didn't have any of those things. I think there was just a couple new Bitcoin VC companies coming out. So compared from 4 years ago to where we are now, way better, like night and day, way better, much more progress. With that though, it's still a lot harder. I would say it's even more harder to raise in this climate than it was 4 years ago. I think 4 years ago, it was a lot easier to raise, but probably not that many avenues that you could choose from. These days, it's much more harder to raise doing Bitcoin Lightning only stuff. And then on top of that, there's a very likelihood you probably should just keep it very small project wise, and then just apply for some grant and then try to make a self-sustaining business that way. Like Bitcoin venture capital is definitely trying to move plebs and other projects into a direction of, hey, just go out and make revenue first, prove this actually works, because we aren't just giving out money like the way we used to. And I think that maybe might change. I'm not sure. I know for me personally, like with running Pleblab, like we're focused on revenue all the time. We had a small raise in 21. Other companies here, Yopaki just got a raise, so they were able to do something slightly different, but they proved a lot of things. They also won top builder. There's a lot of things that had to happen for them to get that raise. It wasn't just like, hey, we have a pitch deck and a couple people, let's do it. It's like those days don't exist anymore. So I will say that. I don't know if that helps or solves.
No, it helps 100%. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because, like, I guess Bitcoin as the asset has developed a lot more? Do you think it's more interest in Bitcoin companies? Like, why do you think that there's that shift? Or is it maybe because we saw, all those crypto, casinos kind of crash, whether it's like FTX and all that? Like,
I actually think it's actually a lot easier. Like, I think it's a lot easier to understand. I think it's a multitude of things, but obviously the highest one is the recession / depression that we're in right now. It's just way more difficult to get capital, and I would imagine to get capital for these funds, like there's just not a lot of liquidity out there. So I would imagine there's that. The also part of it is like a lot of these Bitcoin VCs just got punched to the face for the first time ever. Like they've never gone through, a lot of these were new funds, so they'd never gone through something like this. I've never gone through, you've never, like a lot of us have never gone through a climate like this. So it's rightly so that would make sense. So they're a little bit closer, making sure they have enough capital to take care of the companies that are already inside of their portfolios. The third thing I will say is I think it's fair to say that the Bitcoin ETF really did centralize things to a lot of extent, meaning there's certain people in the ecosystem right now that already have a lot of the services that we need. So we don't need somebody coming in right now to, and I mean this like, I'm waving my hand, meaning it like not pointing at anybody, but just saying in general, I'm trying to generalize. Maybe this is a bad idea, but I will say like we don't need another Zebedee or Strike to come in and do these things, right? Like we don't need another like Voltage or Lightspark. You know, I would even say we don't need another Pleblab or Wolf, right? Like we don't need these other things that are new because we already have a lot of these things and there's already ecosystems built around them. There's communities built around them. Now, when you tell this to a Bitcoiner, the first thing they say, they're going to see that as a challenge and they're going to want to build their own sandbox, and rightly so. That's how everybody gets started. But I think, and I could be wrong, but it does appear to me when I have these conversations in and outside of Austin with these VCs, it does seem like their bets already have been made by a lot of these things. So what they're really looking for is kind of the newer and greater stuff. Maybe it's a Nostr project, maybe it's an AI project, maybe it's something that generates so much Sats flow that they just can't resist, right? And this is why mining and exchanges are always really good places to throw venture capital in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, but those are, I mean, yeah, they're always good, and those always seem to win and like rise to the top because it's just like a kind of a proven business model, it seems. So, but it is interesting, and yeah, so I mean, with that, right? I mean, you think the big recession, whether you think we're in or not, depression, like kind of like how you're visualizing it all, right? So for somebody that's like boots on the ground with all of these startups, I guess like how has it been like building in this, because it is kind of interesting, right? I mean, like, you know, we've got 60K Bitcoin, which we had a few years ago as well. And you said it was a little easier then, but I mean, I feel like this time's different, right? I mean, I feel like we're just sitting on the edge here and it just seems like it's going to blow the top off. But,
I don't know.
It seems like a lot of people are still waiting for that top to blow off before they really take action and move. And you mentioned the 100K as like kind of like a barrier for whether it's like mental barrier or venture
It's a mental barrier. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that's the barrier right there? I mean, we already technically hit an all-time high, right? So, I mean, like why the mental barrier of 100K?
I don't know. I think this is just for me having conversations with not just like one or two investors. This is like multiple angels, other founders. This is like coming from everybody. It's not just me. But to me, it does seem the 100K barrier is like where everybody's waiting for. And I don't know, maybe they bought at 30, because you got to remember the bear market that we went through, it got as low as 16K. But I think for the bulk of it, it was somewhere around 30K, I think. So right now they've really kind of doubled up, right? I mean, 60, even if they bought at 30, they're at 60 now. I think if we get to 100 or 90, that puts it at a 3 multiple, a 3x, I guess you could say. So I think that's another reason. I think maybe what they're looking at, I don't know anything, but I would imagine, you know, that's probably what they're looking at if you just do the math quickly. The other thing I think is, I think there is just this kind of sense in the world right now, and myself included, like you probably don't want to spend in your cold storage, right? You don't want to touch it because you don't know what it's going to look like in 6 to 7 months from now. There's a new election happening, like, you know, it could go one way or another, good or bad. I mean, the dollar's always inflating. There's that. I think there's just a lot of question marks right now, and I don't think a lot of it gets cleared up until November. So I love the way I started. I said, "Oh, it doesn't matter," but at the same time, like to the people that are investing in the space, I think it does matter to them. To me, I'm still going to build regardless, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all you can do, right? I mean, like you got to control the controllable at a certain point in time, especially when you're like a startup builder and everything like that. It's just obviously there's a lot of outside factors that kind of factor into whether or not, you know, you kind of get the money, how much you can accelerate that growth initially, and you know, how everything is going from there. And you know, but I feel like, you know, with this cycle, right? Like where we're talking about it, like, are we in a bull market? Are we not? And all that. I just feel like there's a different vibe around it now. And is that kind of how the general sense that you're getting to, even though people are waiting to maybe get into whether it's the venture capital space or something else? Do you think that like the perception around Bitcoin is like growing in a more positive sense, or is there still kind of like some question marks around it, whether it's, the non-custodial stuff, like people think that it should be custodied or something like that, like little minutia things? Or is it more like everybody kind of understands and you got to find your pockets where you can, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think the last cycle, and I can only compare it to the last cycle because that was the time I was working in it. I was in the other cycles, but it was different because I wasn't working in the space at that time. But I'll say compared to last cycle it was clearly obvious, like Lightning and Bitcoin, where everybody was headed, and everybody, I mean, yeah, Jack on stage, doing the El Salvador, and like it just set everything off. It was like literally a kickoff for everything that happened the next two years, whatever. And I feel like this time around, the lines are completely blurred. Where you can't tell anything from anything anymore. It all looks like, because it's all on Bitcoin now. Like all the roads. I mean, people were right. The prophecy's true. All roads led to Bitcoin. Well, it actually did, and now it's all blurred. And so I think to stand out as a Bitcoin or Lightning project is that much more harder now. And a lot of these other, like, love them or hate them, but all the ordinal stuff and the cat stuff and the NFT stuff and the rune stuff and all that Nostr stuff, all that stuff gets the most attention. And it's just because of the cycle that we're in right now. But the problem with that is I don't know if it's going to lead to actually more money coming in. It seems to be, but it seems to be just, at least before, it felt like, stuff would come in and then it would find its way back into Bitcoin. This time it feels like all that money's coming in, but it's staying where it's trying to build out from. And we'll see if it makes its way to the Bitcoin and Lightning builders out there. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it might start to disperse here pretty soon. And I think, like a big driver of that is not only like, the nation state adoption. You mentioned Jack on stage kind of talking about the Lightning adoption. Obviously, he made the announcement with El Salvador. It's, Milei in Argentina also just recently got elected. He's dollarizing Argentina, but it seems like, he's kind of Bitcoin friendly in a sense. And maybe he'll start to move that way once he kind of repairs some things outside of that. But, do you think like that's going to be a big driver as well? Like maybe there's companies like MicroStrategy and others like leading the way, and they've gotten like 3 or 4 new copycats here recently with companies putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And now it seems like, with the US announcing a potential of a strategic reserve, that more countries might come on. So not only are we having like kind of like the plebs and the grassroots movement, but we're kind of having like almost this shift where it's like the top downs coming in, and then the grassroots movement coming up as well. So do you think that those worlds are almost going to meet here soon, where stuff that we've been working on are almost like preparing for a moment that could be coming in the next 3 to 4 years?
I will say, and this is probably just me speaking my own book, so I'm not shilling, but I do think when I see the plebs out there this cycle, they look far more impactful than the last cycle. I think the last cycle, it was like oh, let's just do it because, we should do it. We have extra spare time. Let's do it. Now it feels like the plebs are organizing and getting together because they realize that it could go completely south. And we're kind of seeing that already in Mexico City, right? Like these plebs that are putting together these events, and then now they're getting a space, and now they're going to do this whole thing, and they're getting behind it. And then you also, like what you said in Venezuela or in El Salvador or in some of these other places in Mexico that are kind of doing the same thing too. And I think Latin America just in general seems to me to be one of those places that's just doesn't mind doing the work to get all this going. And then we also have like G in San Antonio and what he's doing there. And I do think there's a road to like, I don't want to say like to gold, but it does seem like a lot of this stuff is like being built for the next group of people that are going to come in. And I think a lot of plebs are just organizing out a lot of it on their own. And that's extremely bullish because I don't remember that being that way, 4 years ago in 21. I feel like that was just more like a meetup movement, but I feel like this one's actually more like a hub. No, let's get everybody on Bitcoin, whether that's through Samprite or through like other means, wallet means, Zeus or whatever. Like, I feel like that's happening more, but I don't remember that happening as much before. I feel like the last time it was just more, let's just get together and talk about Bitcoin. as opposed to now it's, hey, let's get together and let's like onboard merchants and stuff like that. But that's kind of what I'm seeing the difference this cycle.
Yeah, and talk about the adoption going on in Mexico City, because like I feel like, and in Latin America, like why do you think that it's resonating so much in like Latin American countries, and that's kind of where the movement is coming from, like obviously, like we said, we have Trump and everybody else, but that's more of like a reserve. It seems like the transactional aspect of it is really taking roots in Latin America. Why do you think that is, and how do you see it like continuing to grow here? I mean, as you've been boots on the ground in a couple events down in Mexico City, and I know you guys got another one here coming up soon. Are you looking for the easiest way to get your Bitcoin off an exchange? Well, I've got it for you. It's Foundation Devices. They've got the #1 hardware wallet in the passport. They've even got a concierge service that can help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange within 1 hour private onboarding session. And they've got a great app too, which will give you extremely private features on that app, so you can use Bitcoin in the most secure way possible. So I've been working hard trying to get sponsors to help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange, and I found it with Foundation, and you can store your seed phrase with a stamp seed punch plate as well. So pair all those together, use promo code GREENCANDLE at foundation.xyz, and you'll get $10 off your entire order. All right, that's enough for me. Back to the show.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do like just from culturally. I think culturally, when you look at like Mexican culture, it's a very family first type of like culture. It's very community-ish type of culture. They're very like they're really about the people, if that makes any sense. Like it's more of a let's take care of everybody as opposed to oneself. And I think in America, it's a little bit different. It's more like, hey, let's take care of yourself first, your family, and then the rest of your thing. And I think in Mexico and some of these, right, I don't know about the other Latin American countries, but in Mexico, it's definitely like that. It's definitely like a community family type of atmosphere. And I think it's just that. I think the other thing you asked about was the, why do you think that is? I think the other thing too, I think there's just a lot of, I don't know. I think if you look at some of like even like the Mexican cinema or like the Mexican arts and those type of things, like the culture around that, like that was always very much like one of the things that the people in America or like even in Cannes Film Festival, like they would come and grab these artistic directors and they would pull them out with their films and then try to bring it to other areas in the world. And I think they just have definitely a different lens on what their culture is. And I think there's just a lot of very much people like that, where they're just very initiative focused, very initiative inspired type of, let's bring it to life type of mentality over there. And I think it just kind of shows throughout multiple times in their time period where like, they build the pyramids or they build this or like, all that kind of stuff. And I could be wrong about that. I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I would imagine that has a lot to do with it. I think just Bitcoin just resonates more to them because they understand the value of holding one's own money, maybe. But I mean, a lot of them are still highly dependent on the peso, and a lot of them, follow the rules and stuff like that. But I think there's a growing majority, including even like expats that live down there, that want to make this happen. Also, I think if you're an American moving down there, even visiting, it's much cheaper, much higher quality of living to a certain extent that we already are accustomed to living in here in America, but it's a little bit different because the weather's better down there, much cheaper, just as nice. You can get a lot of the same things in certain areas of Mexico City and stuff like that. But so I think your money goes a little bit longer there.
Yeah, and I was listening to another podcast here the other day where Jack Mahler's kind of describing how I think he had this talk too in Bitcoin Atlantis and Madeira too, where like essentially just like money is your exchange for time, right? And I think like at least from what I know, I mean, I'm half Hispanic, but the Hispanic culture and like I feel like that resonates in Latin America as well. It's like very like hardworking. So you want to have a money that in a sense, makes the most of your time. And that's Bitcoin. There's really nothing better than that. So I think that's another thing that resonates to me. And maybe, I think the unbanked aspect of it is big, but I think like that, I feel like the time and kind of like the hardworking culture is kind of like what you're describing too a little bit, where I think that that's where they're kind of conflating that, and that's what, or not conflating it. That's how they're kind of resonating with the Bitcoin ethos, and that's how, you know, it's starting to grow too. So I think it's interesting. I think Latin America is like one of those places that's ripe for just like, you know, a huge boom. And I think that Bitcoin will kind of help lead the charge. And it seems like there's a lot more grassroots movements down there. So, I mean, it seems like everybody in the Bitcoin space is super bullish on Latin America. One, because of like the culture, and two, just because of, you know, it's just kind of this place ripe for growth. So, I mean, is that something that you're seeing and kind of resonate with as well?
I think also too, like, I mean, for me, I feel 100% comfortable living in Texas. I don't see a threat coming to Texas. But if I was living in some of these other areas of America, I definitely would be like looking over my shoulder about things. Also, I mean, I think taking into account it's a 2-hour flight to like Mexico City and some of these other places, like 3-hour flight, half hour, you know what I mean? So it's very easy for people to just kind of jump on a plane and go down there if shit hit the fan. So I do think it's just kind of, at least for me, how I see it, it's like, it's good to have a plan B. And so if there's a place that I want to go potentially leave to, it'd probably be like Mexico City, right? Like, so why not go water the grass down there and see if we can get it get it growing. That's how I kind of look at it selfishly, I guess, would be like, let's just get it going. And then hopefully at some point, if it doesn't work out in Texas, if it doesn't work out in America, there's at least an option out there that a place where I would want to live is how I kind of see it too. But I think you're right. I think there is just a builder culture down there that just innately comes to these people that live down there.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, yeah, with all of that as well. I mean, like Texas and Mexico kind of have like the similar, I guess, like culture in a sense, right? It was all one country at one point in time. You know, the roots run deep from Texas and Mexico and all that too. So I think that those just messages just kind of like resonate with me, and I think like with everybody that's kind of like in Texas, or I mean, at the root of all of it, I think it's like really just like the American message, but like some places in America are definitely a lot different than Texas, to say the very least. So, but I mean, I think that the builder culture and everything like that is growing and strong. But like on that note, do you see like more people kind of coming in and wanting, whether it's young people, or even like older people wanting a change of careers to kind of get involved into the Bitcoin space, because that's where they see it kind of going, where, you know, it's just more, I guess, demand of people becoming devs, becoming like, or trying to find their space or niche, whether it's in the Bitcoin space or kind of in a Bitcoin company, because of just the growing rapidness of all of this, all the industry, the grassroots movement, all that kind of stuff. Do you see more desire from people, like more plebs, so to speak, coming into the space as well?
Yeah, I kind of see it kind of like somewhere in the middle this time. I think last time I saw more of that. I saw more people like actually leaving their jobs. I was in one of those people that left their job and then pursued a Bitcoin career. I think this cycle, at least what I'm seeing, at least so far, you're seeing a lot of people dip their toes, not so much leaving their fiat jobs, but actually saying, hey, I want to do this on a Saturday or Sunday. How viable do you think this is? Like, I think there's a lot smarter people now where they're just kind of like, oh, I'm totally not going to jump in the Bitcoin space anymore. I'm going to wait until I have something that actually cooks, you know? I think that's the biggest difference I've seen this cycle compared to last cycle, is more of those people are, you know, and I think it's just because it's just how brutal everything is. I also think there's just something to be said about having multiple jobs, you know? I think I think if you're succeeding right now at life and you have, you know, you're able to take care of your family and yourself and you're thriving, you're one of the very few like happening. Like you're very small you're a very small percentage there. I think if you're struggling and you're month to month and you're you know, barely can keep the lights on, that kind of thing, and then you're also, you know, going down this route, I think you're the majority. I think there's a lot of people in that same situation. I think there's a lot of startups even outside of Bitcoin in that same situation. And I think it's not something to like hang your head down and walk with low confidence. It's more of like, hey, this is just the time that we live in, and this is just hard for everybody. So I think being comfortable with the fact of pain, if that's how you're living right now, that's normal. That's the norm, I would say. And this is just for me. I like to hang out outside of the Bitcoin's bubble that I'm in, because I'd like to, whether it's at church or to people like are my neighbors or whatever, like I like to find out what's actually really going on in the city. And this is what I'm hearing. Like, people are getting laid off, people are having to find another job to support their kids, and it's just like, that's what's really going on in the space, or in the world. And you don't hear that if you just listen to Bitcoin podcasts all day, right? I love your Bitcoin podcast, Brandon. You're the only Bitcoin podcast I listen to. But outside of you dropping facts like that, like, there's not really a lot of people telling you that, hey, life is hard. People are struggling. There's startups that are struggling, and this is the norm. So if you're outside of that norm, consider yourself very lucky and blessed, because that's not the norm. But I could be wrong. It could just be the data that I'm looking at.
No, man, I think that's 100% nailing it, right? I mean, I think like it's kind of interesting, the dichotomy I see, because like I mean, I dip my toes in the traditional finance world as well as like the Bitcoin space. So if you ask the traditional finance world, the stock market's still ripping. It's up like over 20% or something like that throughout the year. We've had crazy days. The yen crash caused a big crash one day, but then everything rebounded very quickly. So, it's just normal market dynamics. It's nothing to worry about. But then on the flip side of things, you go into the Bitcoin space, everything's crashing and burning, and, the world's going to end tomorrow. So, I mean, but I do agree that it is somewhere like in between. I think people are struggling, and, nobody really wants to acknowledge that the jobs data is kind of inflated, and, a lot, like you said, you're kind of apolitical, but a lot rides in the election year. They want to kind of make the smoke and mirrors last a little bit, at least until November, to not really sway one thing one way or the other, or maybe potentially sway it another way. Who knows? But I think, there is a lot of people out there kind of struggling, but I do also think that there is a lot of hope with like the way things are growing and kind of, I guess, going and shooting up, because we do see a lot of positives in the Bitcoin space. And what you guys do at Pleblab, I find that as a very big positive too, right? I mean, you recently announced a new startup day in Mexico City. So you've been doing it in Austin. I think like every South by Southwest is what normally when you do it, and you've done a couple others like around this time. So why the first one in Mexico City now, opposed to keeping it Austin? Like, why the transition over there? Are you looking for a way to live on a Bitcoin standard? Have you been trying to do it? You just can't figure it out? Well, I've got it for you. It's at BitRefill. You could go to bitrefill.com/invite/green-candle to sign up, where you can use Bitcoin to buy gift cards on Airbnb, Uber. You could buy plane tickets with Bitcoin, so you can travel the world, see everything going on. You can even buy eSIMs when you're there to help contact your friends and family. So go ahead and join the revolution. Live on a Bitcoin standard, so you don't have to wait for the banks after you sell your Bitcoin, transfer the fiat to your bank, and then go through all the rigmarole, all the fiat trash that you've tried to get through and avoid. Avoid all that. Use BitRefill and sign up here today, and I'll give you $5 towards everything that you are buying with BitRefill. All right, enough from me. Join the revolution on the Bitcoin standard, and back to the show.
Yeah, so there's a couple factors. So I think initially when we were looking at doing our fall startup day, or I guess our summer startup day, it was going to be like at the Commons or here in Pleblab. It was always going to be there. I think Car Gonzalez, BTC, who's a mining company down there, has been making some serious waves, and we wanted to help them with their hub. So that was initially what we were kind of thinking. The other thing was Yopaki. So Yopaki is going to do another. They did a Bitcoin block party last year that everybody attended, and this year they were going to be doing another one. So that was another reason to do it down there too as well. We just got some news today that the venue that we chose initially might not be open for us. So now we're having to pivot to a different venue, it seems like. So that's just part of the events business. That's always going to happen. There's always that possibility. So TBA on where the venue is going to be at. Just follow us online for that. But it'll definitely happen in Mexico City. The other thing I think too is kind of what we talked about earlier. I think there's a growing interest down there. I know we're seeing these big companies pay more attention to it. I think the African dream that a lot of people wanted to happen. I don't know how that's going, but to me, it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. And I think to me, when I look at Latin America, that seems like an obvious place to do a lot of this initiative stuff, because these are people willing and able to do it on their own without their help. You know, they're going to do it anyway. You might as well give them a lift up the mountain to do it. And I think that's not to say anything against other cultures. It's just that this just how the world is, right? So I think there's that aspect to it too as well. And I think finally it's just I only like to do hard things, it seems like, Brandon. And so if you say something can't be done somewhere, I kind of take it as a challenge. And doing a startup day in Mexico City just seems like ridiculously hard. And it's proven to be that way so far, just with all the coordinating and everything. And so I think that was another reason. And then the fourth thing, I think finally for me personally, it's just, I love that town, dude. I really do. I really love that town. I think that place, Austin and Nashville, are like the three cities that I really love a lot. That I would only want to do a startup day at, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. But like, what's been the response for that? Like, whether it's from sponsors, like people, like, how have you seen? Has there been a different drastic response? Has there been more of a response? I mean, I know you guys got, like you mentioned, like Kardashev, Yopaki. Like, there's a few companies that have been building very big, and have gain notoriety because of not only because of Pleblab, but because of the great things that they're building, and
right.
The determination that they've got. So
Right.
do you think like it's been maybe easier this time because of where Pleblab is, or because of the Mexico City? Like, do you think it's been harder because you're doing it in a completely different country and it's kind of the first time doing it out there?
I think it's definitely harder to get to sell some of these sponsorships, if I'm being completely honest, like, and transparent. I think it's very hard to pitch some Bitcoin companies and American companies that, hey, we're going to do this down there. Help us do this. This is what we can offer you, that type of thing. It's just not a easy pitch, to make to people. I will say from the builder side, way more interest, way more people want to be a part of it. So that's good. It's showing you that the builders actually want to go to some of these places and meet other potential users and other clients and other markets. So that's really fascinating. Is on that side, a lot of interest. But on the sponsorships, hey, come help us sponsor, help us do this event, not too much interest. I think we just nabbed Unchained last week, so they're a big part of what we do here in Austin, and they wanted to make sure it'd be a part of what we're doing in Mexico City, which I think is awesome, because I think if there's a 1-2 punch that you need to get a Bitcoin builder culture going, you need I think Pleblab and Unchained definitely can help you with that. So I think that was really cool. The other thing I think is, I think it goes hats off to Yopaki and Kardashev BTC. I think those are the two companies in my mind when I think of Mexico City. And it's nothing against some of these other companies, but like when I think of Mexico City, those are the two Bitcoin companies that come to my mind. It's just like Yopaki and what they're doing with their app, and the big launch event that they're going to be having, and all the initiatives that they have had on the ground, boots on the ground over there. And I think Kardashev BTC with what they're doing with the mining connections that they have in Mexico City, and trying to turn all that natural waste into mining hash power. So I think those two companies specifically are the two big things that are really pushing this forward, and it made it easier for a decision for me to go out and put some elbow grease into it. So I think that's kind of how I look at it. And I think we'll see. I mean, if you can get down there, Brandon, that'll be a really big big thing.
Well, that's TBD. That's a few factors that are underlying here. So maybe I will be out there. Maybe I won't. I'm not quite sure yet. But
green
hopefully,
candle hat down there. That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
Fingers crossed that green candle can make the trip down there. But with that too, Car, you mentioned you like to do hard things, man. What else are you building in the background there? I know we're hinting at it a little bit earlier, like pre-show, but I know you've been up to something here. I mean, I know we were talking a little bit at the beginning about how YouTube just took down Simply Bitcoin. I think they got their channel back, so shout out to them, like actually getting it back and everything. But there's been like that growing movement on censorship and everything like that. Noster's seeing a huge rise, and I know like you guys have a lot of exposure to that, whether it's Noster devs that you guys put on some other great things. But what else are you building in the background over there in Pleblab, Car? I know you guys are always up to something, man.
So we made a soft announcement to our community here probably about a month ago, and we were talking about, and I've been talking, if you've hung around with me since 2022, you've heard me say TV multiple times, and I've said a lot of crazy things, but it's very few things that actually will follow through on, or like an idea, because I'll give a lot of ideas away, but there's very few of them where I actually think that I can actually do it. Pleblab being one of them, and then the second one was Pleb TV. And so this is an idea that I had in 23, where we ended at 23. But at the time, it just wasn't the right time. We were struggling financially on all fronts, so it was just not a good time to launch a new product. Obviously, like I was still getting my kind of sea legs, the whole CEO slot, and so it was just a lot. It just wasn't the right timing, but it was definitely something that I was like already thinking of, like how I would do it, what's the path to get there, all this kind of stuff. And then it wasn't until this year where I was like, okay, no, like I'm gonna do this. Like this checks a lot of the boxes that I needed to do it. And so we made that announcement. Right now, it's still kind of a soft launch. We're still slowly building it. This is something that I want to build over the course of however many years it takes. To me, it doesn't matter if other people build a similar thing. To me, it doesn't matter if other people use it or not. To me, it's like we need to have this. Like Pleblab needs to have this because of like what you said. Like you're talking about like Facebook, you're talking about like Meta, like OpenAI, you're talking about Google, you're talking about Microsoft, Apple, even Netflix, possibly NBC. Like you're talking about a lot of big companies that control a lot of what we watch and consume. And I believe, and this is just another thing, I'll just a little quick sidetrack, because I think some of the feedback that I get is, how do you know these things, or what makes you so special that you get this before anybody else? And so I've been covering crypto and Bitcoin since 2017. I used to go to these Ethereum places. I used to meet with Joseph Lubin and all these people and talk to them about their shitcoin projects. And I've already more than 4 times paid that back with my Bitcoin stuff. But I will say though, this is something that a lot of people have been trying to solve for a very long time. But a lot of these things is just me doing research in the area. Like I won't go down of dedicating my portion of my life to something unless I go and do heavy research into like, is this worth something being built? And trust me when I say this, like they're going to come after your Bitcoin content. They don't want you to have a code storage. They don't want you to have a UTXO. They don't want you to have on and off ramps. They don't want you to have freedom of speech. They don't want you to have a lot of things, man. If they can put you in a pod and take Ubers all day back and forth and eat Uber Eats and all these other things, like they're perfectly happy letting you live that life and putting VR headset on and all that stuff. Like that's the life that they want you to live. But I'm telling you, when I say this, like they're going to come after this content, and it's going to be because of what we just were talking about, like being able to travel across countries and across the world with the seed phrase in your head, potentially have millions of dollars. That's a scary thought to the powers that be. That's a super scary thought. And I think when you look at the power of this technology, that's always been the thing that always just like was like, whoa. Like, so you're telling me I can walk across a border with millions of dollars in my head and go on the other side and be completely self-sovereign. They want to stop you from doing that. They don't want you to know how to do it. They want to make sure like a lot of this technology is erased and is not out there for the masses. Will they succeed? I don't know. But I do think we need to start working on a plan B of a sort for how we decentralize this content. And right now, Pleb TV is that first thing. I think at this point, like right now, we're kind of doing it for ourselves, but I do see us get to a point where we can open it up where anybody could host their content on there, and be able to upload and do all those things. It's going to require a lot of work, a ton of money, all sorts of things. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard. And I just know that if it's I just know if we don't take it seriously now, I'm going to look back and regret. And that was one thing I don't want to do, because there's been many things in my life where I look back and think like, man, I should have done that when I did it because I was right. And I should have. And this is one of those where you can just feel it in your heart, where you just know that, man, if you don't do this, like I'm going to seriously regret this in the future. And I just want to make sure that we don't get rug pulled on a lot of content that we put out over the course of 3-4 years. Like Simply Bitcoin just happened to them. Like that's scary, man, because that is like, obviously they're the biggest podcast in the space. No offense, Brendan, but they're the biggest podcast in the space, Simply Bitcoin Crew. But they also like give out a ton of great information, right, on the daily basis. And imagine if they weren't giving out that great information anymore, like how would the average pleb know what was going on in the ecosystem? And so this is why I think it's so important that we have a platform like this. And these are the same ideas and the same circumstances why I thought we needed to build a Pleblab back in the day, right? With me and Keon, and like a hackerspace, and like thinking through that and why it was important and the ethos behind that. Turned out we were right. And it's the same thing again. It's like, this is why I believe it's going to be hard. I probably don't know every step on how to get there, but we'll figure it out because we figured this out and we're capable men, so.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. Like, I mean, it's just like these centralized things where it's, it is kind of scary, right? I mean, we talked about Zuckerberg coming out and just talking about censorship earlier today, earlier during this interview as well. We talked a little bit about that. We've had the Twitter files. Like, there's been just like countless of these instances in the social media space where, I mean, obviously social media is extremely powerful. But, when you put it in a centralized area and, people can manipulate it, it can be very dangerous too, right? I mean, then that's when you can pump and get scammed, pumped and dumped, like all these kinds of things. So, yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. There's definitely a place for it. And yeah, I mean, you sound very excited when you say it's going to be hard, but I agree with you. It's something that's hard, but it's definitely that's going to be needed in the future. And I think, now that you're putting it out there, there's going to be a lot more people that want to hop on board this.
Yeah, we could use the help. I mean, funding wise, or if you want to help Darren, who's been working hard behind the scenes, doing a lot of this heavy lifting stuff. And there's other people in the lab helping him, on the research side of it. So I would just say, like, this is one of our initiatives is that. And then we have another one that one of the engineers in Pleblab is doing called El-Tor, which is, trying to make that whole network's a little bit more scalable as far as privacy, and leveraging the Lightning Network to do that, either with Bolt 12 invoices or some other methods. And that's when I look at what Pleblab could possibly do. It's like making those two things open source and allowing plebs to be a little bit more self-sovereign, a little bit more privacy, focused in what they're doing. And at the end of the day, be able to take care of their own, take care of their families, take care of their community, and keep marching on. And this is one of the reasons why I Pleblab, Brandon. It's like it's doing all the hard things that no one else wants to do, and it's sacrificing a lot, and that's literally what I feel like I'm being called to do from a higher power. And I feel like as long as I keep doing that, I think God will just continue to open up the pathways to make sure that it comes to providence.
100%. And not only that, I think not only you're behind it with your faith, but I think the whole Bitcoin space and a lot of people are behind you guys as well at Pleblab. So you're doing awesome stuff. So Car, thank you so much for coming in and taking the time again and coming back on the pod. Why don't you tell people where they can find out more about Pleblab and Startup Day in Mexico, how they can support the whole nine?
Yeah, so go to pleblab.dev. There's a ton of information on there. If you want to meet with us here, we do a Tuesday open hackerspace where anybody can come in and work out of the lab on Tuesdays. We also do monthly events. We don't do too many events these days, but we should be getting back to it in October. We're going to be in Mexico City on the week of September 20th. So if you're around the area or if you're nearby, jump on a plane, head down there. We have tickets available at pleblab.dev /startup day CDMX. And then finally, if you want to be a part of what we have going on here at Pleblab, we have an online builder pass. Not too many people buy it, but every once in a while we get somebody wanting just to hang out with us for a couple days, and they get an online builder pass and they're able to interact with us and stuff like that. So we definitely have that. So you can subscribe to that. And then if you just want to show your appreciation of what we do here in Austin, Texas, and some of the other areas in the ecosystem, drop us a donation. We drop tweets about this every day at 8 a.m. Some people are annoyed by it, but to me, it just allows plebs that are listening to drop us $1 or $2 in sats, and that goes a long way. I mean, it'll pay for the coffee, it'll pay for drinks, we're doing a Jippy party on Friday, so we're helping Oliver, who's launching his company called Jippy Education App, Bitcoin Education App. We're helping him launch that on Friday, so your donation could be supporting that as well too. So we try to do our best with all the funds that we get here at Pleblab, and try to take care of the people inside the lab.
Yeah, 100%. They do amazing stuff. So drop a donation, buy something, help them out, help the boys out at Pleblab. And Car, keep doing what you're doing, man. You got the support of me and hopefully all the Green Candle fans as well. So Car, thanks so much.
Dude, just real quick, I just want to say thank you to you, Brandon.
Oh no, come on.
You're somebody who has been a big supporter to Pleblab, and a lot of people don't know this who's listening right now, but Brandon is somebody that has always been willing to do anything and everything for Pleblab. Fly to Mexico City, fly here, and do some of this stuff. And a lot of what you do is, we're so proud of you, man. Like everybody in the lab, whenever we say Brandon and Green Candle, everybody's just ear to ear smiles because we're so proud of you and see who all the people you're talking to. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. I know I'm not Jack Mahlers or Mike Saylor, but hopefully I appreciate you.
Car, you guys have been giving me a bunch of opportunities, and I'll never be too big for Pleblab. Don't worry about that, man. You don't have to worry about that. I'll always be one with the plebs. So looking forward to it. I'm excited for Mexico City, and hopefully I'll see you and a bunch of other people there, man.
Thanks, dude.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the State of Bitcoin podcast. If you really enjoyed this one, I've got another one cooking up for you. You can click that right here, and you can go to the next episode, which is an absolute banger, where I'm bringing you only the latest and greatest guests. Or if you're looking for more macro-related content, you could check out my other channel, Macro Insights Pod. I got it linked for you right here. So where I'm bringing you more about stocks, real estate, traditional finance stuff. So go ahead and check that out. And if you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and tell a friend to tell a friend. All right, enough from me. I'll see you at the next one.